Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today, we're diving into a story that's been exploding across Washington. A story that honestly feels like a mix of an internal Pentagon drama, a political minefield, and a military ethics debate all wrapped into one. We're talking about U.S. Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth, the man who was supposed to be one of the strongest pillars of President Trump's national security team, and who now might be turning into one of the administration's biggest political liabilities. If you've been following the headlines, especially the New York Times report and the earlier Washington Post investigation, you already know this story has grown teeth, sharp ones. And in this episode, I'm going to break down what exactly Hegseth is being accused of, what the Washington Post's whistleblower sources revealed, how the New York Times framed him as a political disaster, why even Republicans are distancing themselves, what this means for Trump politically, and whether Hegseth is headed toward resignation, replacement, or outright scapegoating. And we're going to do this in a clear, simple, conversational way, because these stories get confusing fast. And Washington loves making everything sound like a legal brief, so let's unpack it. This entire political firestorm started with a U.S. military operation in the Caribbean, an operation targeting what the Pentagon described as drug trafficking vessels. Now, these kinds of interdiction missions aren't new. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard operate in the Caribbean all the time, especially when it comes to intercepting fast boats carrying narcotics into Central America, the Gulf, or even toward the U.S. coastline. But what made this mission blow up was not the target. It wasn't the location. It wasn't even the casualties, though that's part of it. It was the second strike. According to the Washington Post, and this is where the scandal really begins, the first attack on the suspected drug-running boat was deadly, but at least 2 people survived. And that's when, according to 2 internal sources, Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth allegedly gave a verbal order for the U.S. forces to strike again, a second attack, on survivors, who at that moment may no longer have been posing a threat. The result? 11 people dead, 2 of them allegedly killed in that second round. Now, in military law, and this is important, using lethal force against individuals who are no longer actively engaged in hostility or who are incapacitated is deeply controversial. It can cross into war crime territory depending on the circumstances. So naturally, people were shocked. Congress didn't know about the operation. Most voters didn't know the U.S. was conducting such missions. And the Pentagon didn't exactly come out proactively to explain it. But the real explosion came when the White House first tried to distance itself from Hegseth, and then, almost immediately, pivoted to insist the second strike was legal. That flip-flop, combined with the explosive Post report, sparked the political crisis we're watching unfold now. Let's talk about President Trump's response, because it tells us everything about where this story is headed. On Sunday, Trump said something extremely notable. He told reporters, "I don't support a second strike. The first strike was already deadly enough." He added that Hegseth told him he never gave such an order. Now, whether that's true or whether Hegseth was simply trying to save face, this kind of comment is rare. Presidents don't casually distance themselves from their defense secretaries unless they sense real political danger. And danger is exactly what this situation represents. Because on Monday, the next day, the White House spokesman shifted the narrative. The second strike was within the commander's authority. Meaning, don't look at the Secretary of Defense. Look at the naval commander who pulled the trigger. So within 24 hours, Trump said he didn't like the strike. Hegseth denied giving an order. The White House said the strike was legal, and they subtly reassigned blame away from Hegseth. That kind of messy messaging is almost always a sign that something inside the administration is cracking. And to be honest, if this were just about the Caribbean strike, the scandal would already be bad enough. But then the New York Times stepped in, and that's when Hegseth's world really began to collapse. The New York Times didn't simply talk about the operation. they pulled out an entire resume of Hegseth's controversies, stretching back months. And the picture they painted? Not pretty. Here's what the Times highlighted. 1. He barely survived his Senate confirmation. He needed Vice President J.D. Vance to break a 50-50 tie. 2. He alienated the media within weeks. He tried to force reporters to sign loyalty pledges to keep their Pentagon press badges. Almost no outlet agreed, not even Fox News. 3. He attacked journalists and called mainstream coverage fake news. Not unusual for Washington, but deeply destabilizing coming from a defense secretary. 4. He angered European allies with off-script comments. During his first Europe trip, his remarks about the Russia-Ukraine war were framed as sympathetic to Moscow's position. This reportedly blindsided several NATO partners. 5. He leaked military information twice. He accidentally shared sensitive operational details in a private Signal chat. Later, 3 staffers he brought into the Pentagon were investigated for unauthorized leaks. 6. He was sidelined from the Iran strike decision process. When Trump greenlit operations against Iranian nuclear sites, Hegseth was basically left out. The White House went directly to CENTCOM instead. This pattern, the fights, the missteps, the leaks, the unforced errors, was painted as unprecedented in modern Pentagon history. And then the Times dropped its biggest point. Hegseth's approach is kill them all, no survivors, and even Republicans want answers. That framing, especially coming from a paper like The Times, turned Hegseth from a controversial official into a full-blown political liability. But the true turning point wasn't even the reporting. It was what Hegseth did next. Right when the administration needed discipline, right when Congress was asking for legal explanations, right when the second strike controversy was making headlines, Hegseth did one thing guaranteed to ignite a firestorm. He posted a meme on X, and not just any meme. It was an illustration of a cartoon turtle from a children's series spraying gunfire from a helicopter at a boat stacked with cargo. He captioned it, "For your Christmas wish list." This wasn't dark humor. This wasn't military gallows humor. This was a cabinet official joking about an operation that had just killed 11 people and was under investigation for possibly illegal conduct. People were furious. Conservatives, liberals, military veterans, religious groups, even pro-Trump MAGA accounts. One response summed up the outrage. This is not drug interdiction. This is bloodlust. Suddenly, the scandal wasn't about military rules of engagement anymore. It was about character, judgment, morality, and Hegseth had just demonstrated all 3 were in question. Normally, in controversies like this, the first group to defend a Trump administration official would be conservative media and Republican lawmakers. But not this time. Here's what we saw. 1. GOP lawmakers demanded legal justification for the strikes. Senators Roger Wicker and Jack Reed, bipartisan, highly respected voices on the Armed Services Committee, formally asked the Pentagon for details on the legal basis of the operation. 2. Conservative influencers criticized the meme. Many openly mocked Hegseth for being reckless and immature. 3. Republican national security commentators voiced concern. Some said Hegseth's behavior was reckless endangerment of U.S. credibility. 4. Internal leaks to the press likely came from conservative-leaning officials. The Washington Post's whistleblowers were 2 individuals with direct knowledge. The Times report clearly had insider sourcing too. Those leaks don't happen unless someone inside the Pentagon, someone with power, wants the Secretary of Defense weakened or gone. So by this point, Hegseth wasn't just under fire. He was surrounded. This isn't really about Hegseth anymore. It's about the president. There are 3 reasons why Hegseth is becoming a political burden for Trump. 1. He undermines Trump's narrative of strong but stable leadership. Trump has repeatedly said he wants a strong military that avoids unnecessary wars. But Hegseth's alleged verbal kill order, combined with a chaotic paper trail, paints the opposite picture. No communication with Congress, no clear authorization, no strategic explanation, and possibly violating rules of engagement. It makes the Trump administration look uncontrolled. 2. Trump publicly distancing himself is a bad sign. When Trump said, "I don't support the second strike," that wasn't just disagreement. That was political quarantine. That was Trump saying, "If this blows up, it's not on me." Presidents don't say things like that about cabinet officials they plan to defend. 3. Hegseth's controversies are stacking and making Trump look careless with appointments. Between the media fights, the leaks, the unforced errors, the NATO embarrassment, and now this Caribbean scandal, Hegseth is making Trump look like he picked a cabinet secretary who's unprepared, undisciplined, and politically radioactive. No president wants that. Let me put this bluntly. Yes, Hegseth is absolutely becoming a major political liability. We know this because we're seeing all the standard warning signs. Warning sign number 1. Trump has begun distancing himself. This is step 1 in the political damage control playbook. Warning sign number 2. The White House is shifting blame onto military commanders. Classic pre-resignation behavior. Warning sign number 3. Major newspapers are reporting insiders want him gone. That doesn't happen unless someone in the Pentagon or White House opened the door. Warning sign number 4. Republicans aren't defending him. When your own side goes silent, the clock is ticking. Warning sign number 5. Hegseth still refuses to give a clear denial. He has never said, "I did not order the second strike." Instead, he attacks the media and talks about destroying drug traffickers. That evasiveness only fuels suspicion. Based on how these Washington scandals usually unfold, here are the 3 most likely outcomes. Outcome number 1. He resigns voluntarily within weeks. This is the most common path. It will be framed as something like, Secretary Hegseth has decided to step down to avoid distracting from the president's agenda. A soft landing, a clean exit. Republicans save face. Trump moves on. The scandal fades. Outcome number 2. He keeps the title, but loses all real power. This is already partly happening. Remember, when the U.S. struck Iranian targets earlier this year, Hegseth wasn't even in the room. Trump and the White House went directly to CENTCOM and the Joint Chiefs. If Hegseth becomes a figurehead, while real military decisions bypass him, his job becomes symbolic. That's Washington's way of putting someone in the freezer. Outcome number 3. A formal investigation forces his removal. If Congress pushes hard on the legality of the second strike, if the whistleblowers provide more evidence, if documentation of the verbal order exists, Hegseth could be pressured out in a more forceful way. This would be the messiest outcome and the one Trump least prefers. But it's not impossible. Is Hegseth actually responsible? Or is he being positioned as the fall guy for a mission that multiple people approved behind the scenes? Here's my honest view. It can be both. Washington loves 2 things. 1. Covert operations. 2. Convenient scapegoats. If the operation was legally questionable, politically risky, or poorly communicated, someone has to carry the blame. Hegseth, with his reputation, his mistakes, his meme posting, his internal enemies, is the perfect candidate. It doesn't mean he's innocent. It doesn't mean he's guilty. It means he's vulnerable. And vulnerability in Washington is basically chum in shark-infested waters. This scandal isn't just about one secretary or one strike. It raises bigger questions. 1. What is the U.S. military doing in the Caribbean that Congress didn't know about? For a democracy, that's alarming. 2. Who has the authority to order lethal force? If a defense secretary can give an oral kill order, that's a serious breakdown in procedure. 3. What is the U.S. policy on drug war strikes? Are we destroying narcotics or executing traffickers? There's a huge difference. 4. If cabinet officials can't control themselves online, how can they manage global conflict? Memes and drones don't mix. 5. How stable is the Trump administration's national security team? If the defense secretary is sidelined, distrusted, and under investigation, that's not a small problem. That's a structural weakness, and adversaries notice. Let me wrap this up with my personal judgment based on decades of how Washington politics works. I don't think Peter Hegseth is finishing his term as Secretary of Defense. Not after the second strike controversy, the whistleblower leaks, the Times expose, the meme fiasco, Trump's distancing, the GOP silence, the internal Pentagon frustration, and the growing congressional pressure. You can survive one scandal in Washington, maybe two, but this man is carrying 5 simultaneously, and all of them cut to the core of what a defense secretary is supposed to be: serious, disciplined, strategic, predictable, and aligned with the president. Hegseth is 0 for 5. That's not survivable. Trump won't let this become his scandal. If the story keeps snowballing, and I believe it will, Hegseth will be escorted out politically before the damage spreads. So yes, Peter Hegseth is already a political liability. The only question now is how and when the administration decides to get rid of him.